Hello. A home of your own. We all need somewhere to live, particularly if you're going to raise a family. And yet, for far too many people in Bristol, a home of your own has now become an impossible dream. My wife and I bought this house in 1976. I was a telephone engineer and she was a civil servant in the tax office. We were just an ordinary young couple. If I were to buy this house today on the same kind of mortgage as we did then, I would need to be earning £130,000 a year. There aren't many telephone engineers earning that kind of money. I had a look on the web, and the cheapest house you can buy in Bristol was £140,000. If you were on the average Bristol wage of £25,000 a year, you would not be able to get a mortgage on the terms we have. Now, we're not talking here about exceptional people. We're talking about ordinary people doing jobs that we all need. Perhaps driving the bus, working as a nurse, seeing that clean water comes out of the tap, or dealing with that stuff that disappears when you flush the toilet. And the fact is that many of these people just cannot get a home either to rent or buy. Points West showed us just before Christmas that there were 1,400 people in temporary or emergency accommodation in Bristol, Bath and South Gloucester. One family they showed us was waiting to be evicted that day and didn't know where they would be sleeping that night. Another family told us about what it was like in temporary accommodation. They were a mother, a father and a young child, and they had just one small room in bed and breakfast, which cost the council £80 a night. And you have to be in pretty desperate straits to get that. I know of one young lady who's looking after her disabled mother, and they will not be eligible for help from the council until they've been homeless for 3 years. They're living in a bedsit. And of course, there are hundreds of people who are truly homeless and sleeping in shop doorways. There are countless hundreds more who are sofa surfing, as they call it, and sleeping on friends' floors or sofas. It's an appalling situation, but it's not new. I can remember Ted Heath and Howard Wilson vying with each other to promise to build more houses if they were elected. You may not remember the names. They were prime ministers at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s. We've had a housing crisis for that long. And let's be clear, we're not talking about the reckless and the feckless and the layabouts. These are usually people in work doing jobs we need. It's a crazy situation. Well, what can we do about it? The great and the good tell us that it's a simple matter of supply and demand. I don't buy that. The demand has been there for years. The Bristol Post told us last year that there are 6,000 plots in Bristol with planning permission to build homes, and they're not building on them. Why not? Well, I can think of a simple reason. An estate agent has told us that when they electrify the main line between Paddington to Bristol, house prices will rise 10%. So why build now? Wait a year or two and you get 10% more for the house. Market forces are not going to solve this problem. We are going to have to do something else. Let me just tell you a little bit about a plot of land in Bristol, Filton Airfield. At the end of the war, the government requisitioned a lot of land to extend the runway and put up the new aircraft assembly hall, which we call the Brabazon hangar. It was all about a project to build a plane called the Brabazon that was never a commercial success. They spent £5.25 million at that time. In today's money, that would be £166 million, a huge investment of public money. The government sold their interest in that land in March 1992 to BAE Systems for just £14.05 million. Not much compared to £166 million, is it? BAE Systems eventually ran the airfield down and closed it at the end of 2012 because they said it just wasn't profitable. So you have this airfield that's worthless. What do you do with it? Well, you go to South Gloucestershire Council and you say, look, we've got this brownfield site. It's just covered in concrete, it's no use for anything, but what we could do is build houses on it. Can we have planning permission? They say yes, and at the stroke of a civil servant's pen, that land is apparently now worth £120 million. That's according to an estimate by the Bristol Post. Not bad for an investment of £14.05 million, is it? And that money, of course, will all have to be found by the people who eventually buy those homes and work night and day to pay for them on a mortgage. Has it helped the Bristol housing shortage? Well, no, I don't think it has. The airfield closed at the end of 2012 and there's still not a single house on that site. That's just one example. Well, if I were Metro Mayor, what would I do about it? Well, I wouldn't work with developers or builders. I would do something quite different. I don't think everybody would like it. Tomorrow I will tell you about it. I call it my emergency housing plan. And the idea is to provide emergency accommodation for anybody who needs it, and hopefully to force house prices down so that we can all afford them again. If you like what you've heard, or even if you don't, please share it. And I'll speak to you again tomorrow about my emergency housing plan. And in the meantime, if you have any comments or questions, bishopstonbarry@uwclub.net. Bye.